Hi ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt, you're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. This video is going to be a little different than a lot of them, in that we're going to talk about some things you might need or want to survive a natural disaster. This is not a complete list, it's not a 100% checklist. What this is a list that Travis and I made, having lived through several natural disasters, and it's actually a list of things we wish we had at the time. Kind of looking back, it's a retrospect, hindsight's 2020. When I was a police officer, there was one of the field training officers was fond of a certain phrase. He would say that experience is that thing you get right after you needed it. So what this list is well, it's the benefit of our experience that we didn't have at the time, but we have now, after we needed it. Anyway, I'm also going to point out that there's going to be a lot of things on this list that are not on this table, because it includes things like a chainsaw and some other stuff that, well, frankly, I was just too lazy to drag in the house. But the one thing we have found that you need anytime there's a natural disaster is water. Guys, you cannot have enough of it. Now, if you know there's a hurricane coming and you're going to have to ride it out at home, you can do things like buy water ahead of time or fill up bathtubs. We had a microburst, which for those of y'all who don't know what a microburst is, it's basically when a thunderstorm dies and sends a downward mushroom cloud that destroys everything on the ground. It's just a big downward explosion of air that blows everything away. We were in Sealy, Texas, which at the time, according to the National Weather Service, was the most powerful microburst in history, or recorded history. I'm sure there's been a worse one, but nobody wrote it down. Anyway, it did a lot of damage to our neighborhood. We were out without power for a week, whole host of other things. This storm was not fully predicted. I mean, they told us we were going to get a little rain, but we weren't expecting a massive thunderstorm, and we certainly weren't expecting the level of devastation that we had. I mean, every power pole in an area 11 miles long and 5 miles wide was down. And it happened suddenly. We've also had a couple what they call 500-year floods. Austin County, where we lived at the time in East Texas, it had 3 500-year floods 3 years in a row, and they've had a couple since. We started naming them things like the Memorial Day flood or the Tax Day flood or whatever, because we just, I guess, had to pick something. Anyway, when we had these things happen, some Hurricane Harvey, things like that, we knew were coming. But for the ones that we didn't know were coming, we couldn't have the bathtub full of water or the 10 cases or something like that. Water is going to be immensely valuable to you. I think that every person should have a couple of cases of water in their house at all times. And not just for you or your kids if you have them, but if you have pets. If you have a pit bull, like some of you guys have seen in our videos, he drinks water too. We have horses. That was actually a big problem after one of the floods and one of the microbursts, because we had power out. It ruined the well in the area we lived. So we had no water at the house, in one case for over 2 weeks. We were actually taking buckets and driving down to a creek where it had good clear water and taking these big 5-gallon buckets back to the house to fill the water troughs. After that, we bought an extra water trough, had some big Tupperware things we didn't need filled with water. So we knew how much the horses need for a couple days, but we made sure at any given point there was water enough out there for them to drink without replacement for about a week. I have a couple of things y'all can keep. Something as simple as a bottle of Ozark. I mean, get a couple cases. They're not very expensive. You can go to Walmart, you can get a case of 24 of these for $4. It's worth dropping the 10, 12 bucks just now, next time you go to the store if you have it. Buy some cases of bottled water and just stick them in a pantry somewhere or a closet. These things get really valuable when you don't have them. I also have this 5-gallon water container. If you know something's coming, or sometimes when one of these storms rears up, or hey, there's a flood, water's rising, that sort of thing, is you can't drink the flood water. It's got all kinds of junk in it, and oil and other crap. You can, before water or power goes out, go fill one of these up, or 2 of them. They're not very expensive, a few dollars at Walmart. This is Ozark Trail. But it holds 5 gallons of water. At least it gives you something you can boil. And after a lot of natural disasters, that's the one thing you'll hear. Puerto Rico, there's a big fix recently because they found 20,000 cases, or 20,000 pallets, which is 78 cases of this sitting on a runway that somebody lost while people were going thirsty in Puerto Rico. But the number one thing you always want is water, and if you have some ability, even if you live in an apartment or something, you can still fill up a couple 5-gallon jugs or having some pallets of water. It's one thing I cannot emphasize enough. Even when, like with Hurricane Harvey, we thought we were prepared with water, we still didn't have enough water. I can just tell you that from experience. Something else you're going to want, and this is kind of a 2-segment here, is food you don't need power to prepare. Think peanut butter and jelly, a loaf of bread. Something I have here is tuna fish, canned tuna fish. If you live in an area like we do, we're out in the country, so we were able to use the barbecue pit. I've got a propane grill that we could turn on and cook things with, but propane was limited. So if you're in an apartment or something and there's an issue and you don't have electricity, most apartments now don't have gas anymore. So if you're without electricity, you can't cook. So plan on having at any given point, even if it's simple, inexpensive staples like the peanut butter and jelly, extra loaf of bread or something. Make sure you can at least eat for a few days, because inevitably when this sort of things happens, it's going to happen the morning before you were going to go to the grocery store and stock up again, and there's not crap in the pantry. I know that from experience. You also want pet food. If you're one of these people that when the dog food runs out, you go get more dog food, I guarantee you a natural disaster, which will hit us all, is going to happen probably the day that you needed to go get dog food. And if you have a special needs overweight pit bull like I do, he really wants food. On one occasion, we had a nasty storm come in that turned into one of the aforementioned 500-year floods. Travis actually, I had to stay in town. My job, I wasn't allowed to leave the area for. But I sent Travis a little ways down the road, somewhere it's going to be higher ground with the dog. And even that area, bridges started being overwashed and things like that. He found a hotel, but the problem is delivery trucks weren't getting in, so he couldn't go to Walmart or anything along those lines. He found a Burger King that was staying open because they had plenty of stuff, but he was feeding the dog stuff he got at Burger King. That's really not the best circumstance. Now, don't get me wrong, my dog will eat the chicken fries all day long, but it's not good for it. So plan for your pets too. It's not just you and your kids. If you've got a dog, or in our case horses or chickens or something like that, make sure you're planned for them as well. Now, the next thing on the list I have is rubber boots. And I didn't bring in any of the rubber boots we have because they're all muddy and dirty and I didn't want to. But a $10 pair of rubber boots you can get at Tractor Supply, Walmart, anywhere like that you can just throw in your trunk and have. Every time there's people say inclement weather or natural disaster, outside of an hurricane or an earthquake weather and a wildfire, natural disasters always involve water. Rubber boots are also fairly thick, so if you have to walk over some stuff, if you've got a tornado that hit and you've got debris laying around, rubber boots aren't the most comfortable to walk in, but you're not going to have nails and other things punching through them. They've actually got pretty thick soles. And if you've ever had to go out somewhere after a tornado, as I have, and stepped on a 2-inch nail, you know, that $10 for a pair of rubber boots is money well spent when it doesn't punch through and get your foot like it did mine. I was wearing Nike tennis shoes at the time. Something else that I recommend everybody have is cash. We tend to think, well, I have plenty of money, I have money in savings, I have stocks or whatever, or credit cards. The big thing I hear from people that think they're prepared is credit cards. But the one thing I have found consistent with just about every natural disaster is when power goes down or grids go down in areas, think a hurricane or an earthquake or something like that. One thing you're going to run into a lot of times is most of the places in your area that you'd be able to go shopping are going to have a hard time processing the credit cards. And even if you have money in the bank, you can't necessarily buy something. Keeping 40, 50 bucks or even a 20 in cash around goes a long way if you've got to get something to eat or something to drink or put some fuel in the tank. I know during Harvey I was able to buy diesel because I had some cash on hand, but the one gas station that had the diesel couldn't take cards, so I was literally having to shell out some money to get diesel for my truck. But you want to think about that. The next item is a chainsaw. That doesn't really apply to everybody. If you live in an apartment, you may not need a chainsaw. But if you live in a neighborhood, and let's say tornado or hurricane and earthquake hits, you may decide that you're going to, all right, screw this, I'm going to let whoever take care of it, let the contractors or insurance deal with it, I'm going to grandma's house for the weekend. One thing we've run into consistently is that when trees and power poles go down, they block roadways. I saw this as a police officer and first responder. I've seen this as just a guy trying to get out of my neighborhood. When the microburst hit and we were living in Sealy, Texas, Travis was taking his 2-year-old cousin home. The little boy's family lived in an area where it wasn't affected by the microburst. But it took Travis several hours to make what would normally be a 20-minute drive. And it was because trees were down, power lines were down. I had a chainsaw and was able to get a hold of another one after that event. I had to drive 2 hours to get it, but I was able to get it, which came in handy because what we used it for primarily was one of my neighbors had several large trees come down, and we volunteered with some other people to go over and clear it because the power company needed the trees cleared so that they could run line back to her house. The woman had an elderly mother that needed oxygen. But from a very practical standpoint, if there's a tree down in the street next to your driveway, you can't back out your car. We were just discussing that earlier at the house we're in now. So something as simple as a 10-inch Husqvarna, chainsaws are not inexpensive, but in an emergency, if you are going to leave and go somewhere else, you may have to clear some things out of your way to do it. And that's something a lot of people run into. Along those same lines, get a good pair of work gloves. Even if you don't have a chainsaw, there's a good chance there's going to be debris laying around you need to move out. It may not be heavy. I mean, a 2x4 with some nails sticking out of it, you don't want to drive over and on your street isn't a big deal. But why get splinters? Why get your hand cut up? This is a pair of leather gloves. You can get them for about $2 at Walmart. Not very expensive. I would also want a good flashlight. While we had flashlights at the time, I started switching to flashlights, and my flashlights are always all rechargeable. Didn't occur to me until before a natural disaster or two that I needed to get rechargeable flashlights with car chargers. Because with a microburst, with Harvey, with one of the floods, we were 5, 10, one case, nearly 3 weeks without power. And because of that, our vehicles were the only way we could charge our cell phone or charge anything else. And so especially if you live in an apartment where you can't run a generator or something, having something as simple as one of these little doohickeys that takes USB cord, and we have another one that's an adapter that plugs into your car, and it has the normal outlet plug-in for you can charge something or run a TV or something, I guess, if you want to, but to where you can charge some of the things that you would normally plug in. And for that, like a flashlight or a cell phone or pretty much anything else you want. I'd also, just in general, want vehicle chargers, the adapters, the whatever. Anything you have that's electronic, after a natural disaster, you're going to have to go some time without one. And you want something, you're going to need that electricity. You're going to want the phone for communication, for news updates, things like that. You just may want to charge a flashlight, or hell, just turn on the TV and plug it in the car and watch Game of Thrones, because, you know, what else are you going to do? Personally, I think if the grid's down and everything's dark everywhere, then probably the best thing you can watch is The Walking Dead, because it just has an agreeable ambiance, but you do with it what you will. But something like car chargers come in very handy. I'd also like a watch. One problem we had when we were running out of power, cell phones were dying, and hell, a lot of the towers were down too, is just telling what time it was. During the day, but also at night. You've got heavy cloud cover so the sun comes up later, things like that. There's something about just knowing that it's 2:15 in the afternoon that's helpful. Big coolers. We use Ozark Trail coolers because I'm cheap. Yeti, Frio, they make some too. But you want at least one large cooler. There's going to be somewhere in your area you can buy ice on the first day. And you want to get your ice into a cooler before it melts. You're going to have some perishables in the fridge. You're going to want to keep water and Cokes cold. But the thing is, after 2 or 3 days, you may not be able to get any more ice. So you want to buy up as much ice as you can. And you're going to want to keep as many things cold as you can. You don't want to waste all your food if you can help it. And I recommend going with a decent sized cooler. If you're just one person, you can probably downsize. But if you're a family with 2 or 3 kids or whatever, you want to be able to preserve as many things as possible. And I can tell you this, when a tornado, they typically hit kind of into spring, summer. When one hits, it knocks out the power, and then it's 95 degrees the next day. Having a cold bottle of water versus a warm bottle of water, that's all the difference in the world. So I know that some of your more expensive, your better quality coolers that stay insulated can be very expensive. I mean, we spend $150 on the ones we have, and not everybody can do that. But any cooler is better than no cooler, but you do want one that's a decent size. One thing Travis actually recommended was some type of heating system. A space heater that you can plug into a car outlet. The ability to get into your car and put the heater on full blast. And it goes back to, even when it's a summertime storm or summertime emergency, a lot of times inclement weather involves water and you're soaking wet. With Hurricane Harvey, it wasn't necessarily a cold time of the year for Texas, but when you're pulling people out of the water, the rain that's coming down is cold, the water coming in off the rivers is chilly. One of the things the Red Cross was doing was issuing everybody a blanket, because once they finally start trying to get dry, they are cold. and it takes a while to warm up. Something like a space heater can go a long way, because if you want to go from wet to dry, the ability to generate a little heat is handy. And if you live out in the country or have your own home and can do it, some type of, you have a propane heater or something like that if you really want to. But just think about that. Now, a lot of this stuff would be solved with a generator. We went ahead and bought a 3,500 watt generator. We can run quite a few things with it. It was $400, and I know a lot of people can't swing that. But you can usually, for under $200, find a generator that can run a few things. Now, after a major storm, you're not going to run your air conditioning, your refrigerator, your television, your vibrating bed thingy, whatever. You're not going to run it all with a generator. But if you can keep the refrigerator going, or maybe run the refrigerator and the television. If you've got kids, being able to run a television during a natural disaster is a godsend. During the microburst, where I mentioned Travis had to take his 2-year-old cousin home, the boy comes, we're trying to assess the damage, and the kid comes up to me and he's got a DVD. He was 2 at the time. He wanted to watch whatever it was, the Ice Age, I think it was. And, well, there's no power. He can't. I'm like, sorry, buddy, it doesn't work right now. Well, his solution was to go get a different DVD. Not really solve the problem. But if you've got children, or if you need to run a radio so you can get some news, some localized information, or something like that, having the ability to generate your own power so you're not just running your car all the time can also be very handy. There are some really good options. If just you may want to research them for your own needs. But think real seriously about getting a generator. I kind of have generic camping stuff. Now, during most of these natural disasters, people are not going to camp out. They're going to go to a shelter. They're going to go get a hotel a couple hours away. In our case, where we have animals, we have horses, a lot of your shelters are not going to take pets. You may have to ride out in the aftermath of a natural disaster on your own property. The reason that I have something simple like a tent, this is a $20 tent that I bought at Academy. It's a Magellan. Travis has an Ozark Trail, I believe it is, or Magellan. I know I've bought both. But we can't necessarily, we can't take a pit bull to a shelter, even if he's friendly. Apparently people are scared of pit bulls, which as much as he likes to cuddle, I can see why. But we also have horses, we have chickens, and we wouldn't be able to leave a property. But after a damaging storm, think a tornado or an earthquake. For those of you in California, earthquakes and wildfires are major considerations. You may both have to stay in or around your property where there aren't hotel rooms or shelters available immediately. But at the same time, your house, the home you were living in, may not be structurally sound enough to stay there. And a $20 tent can go a long way. So it's worth having, and it's also an excuse to go out to a state park and camp and enjoy our fine state and national parks. I recommend everybody do that as well. Sunscreen. After every natural disaster, if you own your own home or property, you're going to have to be out there working on it. There's no way around it. Yes, you can hire contractors or somebody else can come do it, volunteers. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to spend some time out there. And for those of us who don't work, I work outside now, but I haven't always. For people who don't work outside all the time, you really want to have some sunscreen handy. You also want to have bug repellent. That's because, as it will happen, there's something that I have learned about floods and tornadoes and hurricanes and pretty much anything that would affect me negatively weather-wise. It brings out mosquitoes like crazy. There wasn't a mosquito one before the microburst. Afterwards, when we're working in the yard, you couldn't swat them quick enough. They're everywhere. And in Texas, our mosquitoes are the size of a bird. So, you can only live with so many bites. So having a can or two of off laying around the house, or Repel or something, as well as some sunscreen, can go a long way to just making your life more comfortable. Non-electronic kid toys. If you have children, you absolutely want to have something they can play with that they like. And for these purposes, you may, if you have the money, want to have a toy you haven't given them. Think about buying a birthday or a Christmas present several months early and just have it stored somewhere so that when a storm or something like this hits, they have a brand new one they can play with that occupies their mind more. Most people, if you've got kids, you've got a house full of toys. You should see my living room sometimes. But the point is, you still want to have something that's going to occupy them. And so many of our children nowadays are so used to be wired in, playing with an iPad or playing video games or something like that, hell, Travis is 20-something. He can hardly sit there without playing a video game and not yawning. But you want to have something that'll occupy, especially a young child's mind, so you can do what you need to do and not have them panic. So think about toys, and definitely think about having that stash for birthday or Christmas you buy ahead of time. So that if something like this hits, you can hand them something that's brand new. It's something that they wanted, but they haven't had a chance to play with yet. Tends to occupy them a little longer and kind of takes the fear out of it. You want to have a decent jacket, something long sleeved. Not just for bug bites, not just for working, but a lot of your natural disasters hit in the summertime. And it knocks out power, and you've got to go out and get branches off the roof. You really don't think about how much you get cut up trying to do that, but it's half the time it's going to be at night. You're not going to be able to see as well as you'd want to deal with it. I know with tornadoes, debris flying around, various other storms, I always recommend having something long sleeve. I say just go get a medium level jacket. It also has a little more thickness and offers more protection. That's something I really wish we had a couple times. And you also want to have something for vehicles, specifically your vehicle's tires. Now, I don't expect the average person to do mechanic work on the side of the road, but after natural disasters, you're going to be able to see a board or a tree in the road, no, not to drive over it. Well, I hope you do. I know a few people that probably would. But the one thing that you're not going to be able to see is the number of roofing screws, nails, other pieces of metal that are for structural building that tend to get sucked out of wood and fly around. I mean, and if you get one flat after a microburst or tornado, you're going to get two or three. A $20 air compressor may take a half hour to get your tire back up, but it beats walking and leaving all your stuff in the car. That way, if you are going to leave, you can take your vehicle with with you. At a $5 plug kit, they work simply. Take a pair of pliers, pull the nail out, stick the plug in, make sure it's greased up, and then you hook up your compressor and you air it back up. That $25 investment can, a lot of times, I've seen this after floods where debris is washing through, after hurricanes, after tornadoes. That simple $25 investment you keep in your trunk and never pay attention to can be the difference between you having to walk and leave your vehicle with two flats on the side of the road. That has happened. Travis, who's filming this, one time had to walk 7 miles because we couldn't fix flats. Anyway, think about having a $25 kit and compressor to where you can air up a tire, or even if you have a nail in it, you can drive a little further if you put more air in it. But that way you can keep your vehicle, not ruin it, go down the road, and if you are going to evacuate and stay somewhere else, you don't have to walk out, because we've done that and it sucks. Anyway, like I say, this is not intended to be a complete list. It's just, I wanted to offer some of the things that we wished we had had when natural disasters have hit us. So I hope it was helpful. And for some of you who have, especially those of you who've been through earthquakes and wildfires, if you have some things that you think needed to be added to this list, or that people should think about, by all means, throw it into the comments. I am happy to learn from somebody else's experience, so I get it before I needed it. Anyway, this is Broke Rednecks Prepping. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll all like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.